Taoiseach, co-leader of the Social Democrats, Deputy Councillor Murphy, please.
Thank you. Taoiseach, we're all braced to see if NPHET recommend further restrictions to suppress COVID later today. Media reports suggest that the level of socialising during the Christmas period could be the target for that advice. This could extend, we're told, to new limits on the numbers allowed in hospitality settings, reduced booking sizes and even reduced opening hours. For the hospitality and entertainment sectors, this amounts for death by 1,000 cuts. The late night sector has already been effectively shut down after just about 3 weeks of being open. And the hospitality, entertainment and tourism sectors are struggling to cope with the wave of cancellations after NPHET and the government previously appealed for people to reduce their social contacts. While the advice was undoubtedly necessary to stem the steep increase in COVID cases, it came at a very real cost. Previously, when the public health advice put limits on the ability of businesses to trade, the government stepped in with business supports. This was in recognition of the fact that businesses were acting to their financial detriment in an effort to protect public health. However, the situation we find ourselves in now is now different. The public have heeded the advice, plus restrictions are being announced, but the supports to cushion the financial blow of these restrictions are being either withdrawn or eroded. This is an inherent hypocrisy in this, Taoiseach, from the government's side. Restrictions are still deemed necessary to suppress COVID transmission, but supports for workers and businesses are being phased out. You enthuse about the personal responsibility as a means of suppressing COVID, but what about the government's responsibility? The PUP has long been closed to new entrants and has already been cut twice to €250. The employment wage subsidy scheme, which has been a vital lifeline for business, has now been slashed. Wage subsidies that were paid to nearly 30,000 employees were cut yesterday, just a few weeks before Christmas. Previously, there were 4 rates, 203, 250, 300 and 350 a week, but these have now been reduced to 2 flat rates, 150, 150 and €203. Taoiseach, my questions are, why did you proceed with these cuts given the restrictions are still being announced, and why not a targeted approach? Is there now some kind of a Darwinian survival of the fittest in terms of the businesses that can withstand this new fourth wave and what that's bringing to some of those businesses? And the ones that will survive, and can you commit to restoring the EWSS rates for those businesses that can demonstrate that the continued support, that they need continued support, and PUP payments for those for those workers who have lost their jobs because of public health advice?
Thank you very much, Deputy Taoiseach.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Deputy, for your questions. NPHET, as you know, is going to meet today. After that, they will formulate their advice. A letter will be written to the Minister for Health, and once the government has received advice from NPHET, the government will then consider that advice and make a decision on its implementation. And of course, as part of those considerations, we will have to make decisions in relation to the pandemic unemployment payment and the employment wage subsidy and other financial supports that businesses may need. But it's prudent to see what the advice is and how that will impact on people and businesses before deciding what our response will be in terms of financial support for workers and for business. And I don't want to preempt the outcome of that meeting, which hasn't even happened yet. I think it is important to say that the pandemic unemployment payment has given people vital income support throughout this pandemic. I was there the day it was invented, me, Regina Doherty and Pascal Donoghue. Glad we did it. I think it made a big difference and was very necessary. At peak, 650,000 people were in receipt of it. We're down around 60,000 people now. But if it's the case that people end up being laid off or being made redundant over the course of the next few weeks, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, of course we'll need to respond to that. It wouldn't be fair to say to them, some of them being laid off potentially for the second or third time, that all we have for you is the traditional job seekers payment. And that is my view on that. In relation to the wage subsidy scheme, we have to give close consideration to what we may do with the wage subsidy scheme. Bear in mind there are 2.4 million people now at work in Ireland. more than ever before, or close to more than ever before, believe it or not. Most businesses that I encounter are telling me that they're struggling to find staff. That's the context of the economy that we're now operating in. And most of the companies that benefit from the wage subsidy scheme are not in the hospitality, arts, entertainment sectors. So we have to bear that in mind too. And it would appear that one of the difficulties with the employment wage subsidy scheme is that it can't be broken down on a sectoral basis. But we will get more information from the Revenue Commissioners in relation to that. I think it's important that anything we do is targeted to the workers who may be affected and to the businesses and the sectors affected, not necessarily an across-economy approach for sectors that may not need these financial supports anymore, which ultimately are very expensive and are at the cost of the taxpayer. The employment wage subsidy, for example, costs €400 million a month, which is a huge amount of money. We need to make sure that anything we do is targeted at the businesses and sectors that need it, and not those that don't.
Deputy Murphy.
There might not have, the advice from NEFIT, for example, and from government for people to reduce their contacts, people heeded that and heeded it in their droves, and they've been cancelling, for example, Christmas parties and going to events and things like that. Like, just an example of one of the people who contacted me, and I'm sure the same people are contacting you. It tells me that we've seen 80% of our bookings vanish, and another 20% they're expecting will go in the coming days. Very stressful time, they're saying, for their employees, and they're talking about having maybe to close the business and whether they can survive the Christmas. This was going to be the month that was going to help them over the lean months in early New Year. They talk about the increases in utility, food costs, having to have insurance as an overhead, all of that. This is, I'm not saying that this shouldn't be targeted. There needs to be targeted supports for this particular sector, or these particular sectors. These sectors enrich our towns and villages, they enrich our tourism offering, and essentially the problem is we can't afford to lose them, but they can't afford to keep the doors open either. Will you commit to giving particular consideration to those particular industries where there is, where they are already seeing, without the advice coming, they're already seeing a serious hit?
We're way over time. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. I'm happy to give that commitment, and I will give you that commitment here in the House today. How we realise that commitment and what form it takes will depend on the advice that we receive today from NEFIT. And it didn't make sense to us as a government to announce a set of financial supports for businesses on Tuesday, only to receive advice from NEFIT on Thursday and then change it again on Friday. It made sense to wait until we see what the advice from NEFIT is today, and we will do that. I want to acknowledge the truth in what you said, that even though we haven't closed any businesses, people are voting with their feet. And a huge number of bookings have been cancelled in restaurants and in bars. Huge numbers of parties have been cancelled in events. People are even cancelling trips away around the country and abroad. And that is having a significant economic impact on those businesses and workers. For the hospitality sector, Christmas is the harvest. It's the time you essentially make money to get you through a tough period, usually in the early part of the new year. And the government absolutely recognises that. But exactly what we do in relation to EWIS, PUP, CRIS, commercial rates, all of those things has to be targeted. And we're at that point where we will be able to make decisions in the next couple of days.
Thank you very much, Tony.